Hello and welcome to Weighing In with Rob Tebbutt. We are live here on One-on-One Boxing ahead of Chris Eubank Jr. versus Liam Smith 2, or Liam Smith versus Chris Eubank Jr. 2. Must correct myself when I say that. And we are live, so I'm just going to wait for everybody to join us ahead of tomorrow's action. Just got the start of me coming up here on the screen where I'm not quite prepared yet. But say hello in the chat. We've got 7 of you watching at the minute. Hopefully that will grow higher as we keep going here and build up to Chris Eubank Jr. and Liam Smith getting on the scales. Just going to find it so they're not jumping on the scales before we get started or afterwards. But how are we doing, everybody? Don't forget to please like, comment, and subscribe. You're going to hear a lot of that today on One-on-One Boxing. We are still trying to build out the channel, so you will be hearing me asking you to hit that like and subscribe button at various times throughout today's live. Got a few questions coming in from Twitter, which we will get to once we have a little bit more of an audience in here at the minute. Going to jump on and have a look at the weigh-in at the minute. Wasn't able to get to Manchester today, unfortunately. Train strikes. So actually had to get a very expensive taxi into the studio because we got to bring you the content. However we do it, come hell or high water, we are always here for you on One-on-One Boxing. Just getting the weigh-in up now. Seems to be quite a few people there in Manchester. I don't know about you guys, but I'm actually more intrigued by the rematch than I was for the first fight. Almost 7,000 people watching live at the minute as we get Dylan Moran about to jump on the scales ahead of his bout with Florian Marku. Okay. Dan Chapman says, don't worry, I won't tell Andy Clark I've stopped watching him on Sky to watch this. It's okay, don't worry about it. Andy Clark's fine. Andy Clark's fine. George says, all right, Rob, is one-on-one part of BN or more of a separate thing? It's part of BN. We're going to be giving you various different bits of content that, may not always be suitable for Boxing News. Look out for the Influencer Boxing Show. I know the Boxing News hardcore audience will absolutely love that. So make sure you keep your eyes peeled for that on One-on-One. But yeah, we are almost ready for a face-off. I'm expecting quite a fiery face-off between Florian Marku and Dylan Moran. I think Florian Marku is the type of guy to get into an argument in a room by himself. So this will be interesting. There, of course, were a few crosswords at yesterday's press conference. Don't forget, guys, to please like, comment, and subscribe. Got to get the subscriber base up here on One-on-One. Florian Marku just about to weigh in. There's 2 weeks in a row we've gone for weighing in, live from the weigh-in, but we've been scuppered a couple of times. Florian Marku now getting onto the scales. Just going to turn it up a little bit here so we can hear. £10 stone, £6, 5 ounces for Florian Marku. So underneath the £147 limit. Okay, right, we're going to get up and running with some questions, I think, rather than waiting for questions in the chat. Remember to get your questions in if you have anything that you want to talk about, whether it's Liam Smith versus Chris Eubank Jr. 2 or anything else across this crazy old sport of ours. Don't be shy, get your questions in, and I will do whatever I can to answer them. Or I'll kind of waffle around the point and maybe not answer them, who knows. Get the questions in, we'll find out. Gonna jump in on some of the questions that we had previously, one of which from Ryan Gilesy from Twitter, who asked me, who's Liam Smith's #1 target if he wins again this weekend? I asked him the same question when we went down to the gym a few weeks ago. I think Liam Smith is at that stage of his career now where he wants only the biggest fights, only the biggest paydays. He's out of contract with Boxer after this fight. This is his last fight with Boxer. So he's already kind of, I don't know, maybe playing the field a little bit. I hope he doesn't mind me saying that. And looking at what could potentially come next. He's obviously been ordered by the WBO recently. Just gonna pause just while we get the Florian Marku, Dylan Moran face off. Ben Shalom in the middle, breaking it up. Big Ben Shalom. Don't want to cross that, man. There we go. Both looking in tremendous shape this weekend. Bit of spice to the face off. Go on. I mean, obviously keeping everything completely professional, but we like a bit of back and forth. Florian Marku, Dylan Moran, almost nose to nose. There we go. There's the push. There's the push. And the most unexpected push, of course, for a Florian Marku fight. There we go. Just finishing off the question that we had from Ryan Giles. Big up Ryan Giles of boxing Twitter overlord that he is. I think Liam Smith probably has 3 options after this fight. I think he probably has more than 3 options if he is indeed successful against Chris Eubank Jr. again tomorrow night. I think Janibek Alimhanuli, of course, the WBO champion, Liam Smith, a former WBO 154-pound champion, was ordered to box Janibek for the 160-pound title. I think Liam Smith would like that fight. I think it's an opportunity for him to become a 2-weight world champion. I think it's fair to say that Janibek, while a brilliant amateur, former world amateur champion, hasn't set the world alight at times as a professional. Of course, had that fight with Denzel Bentley that was probably a little bit closer than many people, myself included, expected it on the night. So I think Janibek is an option for Liam Smith. Kell Brook is an option for Liam Smith. We've heard kind of Kell Brook murmurs and whispers about his name and him coming back into the sport. Those two have obviously had various spars together that we've all seen in preparation for some of their fights. All the spars have always looked quite tasty, so it wouldn't surprise me for that. And then the other one is Conor Benn. Like it or not, his name is being banded around for those big fights, and I don't think Liam Smith would shy away from that one if the price is right. So I would say probably Janibek, Kell Brook, Conor Benn. But Liam Smith told me when we went down to the gym, don't forget to check that out on One-on-One Boxing, our full sit down with Liam Smith ahead of tomorrow night, where he basically said, look, I'm not interested in signing with anybody for a free payday. Come here and do an 8-rounder or a 10-rounder, and then we'll get you a big one. He wants the biggest fights and the biggest money available to him. And fair play. He's 35 years of age, had a long, hard career. Pay the man. Pay the man. Okay, Jordan Pollock, shout out Jordan Pollock, the man who's doing the cuts, the man behind the scenes, the man with a plan. Says, who's your British pound for pound top 5? I did one of these recently, and I'm not sure. It's changed an awful lot, to be honest with you. I think I had Tyson Fury at number 1, which really annoyed a lot of people, which kind of the idea of doing a pound for pound list, I think. Number 2, I had Sonny Edwards. Number 3, I had Joe Cordina. Number 4, I had Lee Wood. And number 5, I can't remember. But there's 4. There's 4 of the 5. Let us know who you think the number 5 could be in the comments. There we go. Dr. Draycott, do you think Chris Eubank Jr. will be more cautious in the rematch? I don't know. I'm very interested. I think everybody and anybody who's watching this fight has to be interested in seeing what Chris Eubank Jr. does in the first few rounds in particular. Liam Smith was very, very kind of brutally honest after the fight and said that he felt that Chris Eubank Jr. was scared, was terrified of being hit, in his words. We've seen now Eubank is split with Roy Jones Jr., so that kind of elusive back foot style, getting behind the jab, is that going to work? Is that what he's going to try and do on Saturday night? I'm not quite sure. Being more cautious, I think it's counterproductive. I don't think Liam Smith is a good enough boxer to kind of box and move and stick and move for 12 rounds against somebody like Liam Smith, who's very, very underrated. I think Liam Smith, he's not just a brawler. He's not just somebody who goes in there and can only have a tear up. He's calculated, very purposeful with his movements, very, very good at getting in on the inside and letting those combinations go, as we saw in the first fight. So I would actually like Chris Eubank Jr. to return to that attritional Chris Eubank Jr. that we saw all of those years ago. I'm not sure that person exists anymore, though, I have to say. I think coming down from 168 to 160, I know Eubank wasn't a big 168 by any stretch of the imagination, but he is getting on now. He's 34 years of age, had a long, hard career, making 160 now. I don't think he's looked as robust as we've seen him in the past. He had the fight with Vanik Adouane, he had the Marcus Morrison fight, 2 quite strange performances. Then he had the Liam Williams fight where he had him dropped and down seemingly every time he touched him, but then kind of went through the motions again. I just don't know if Eubank has it in him to box like that for 12 rounds. I would like to see Eubank get close, flick the jab out, and then try and let his hands go. I actually felt like the best version of Chris Eubank Jr. was under Nate Vasquez against James DeGale. I know James DeGale wasn't at his best, but I did feel like that version of Eubank was good, jabbing your way in rather than jabbing and keeping your distance and moving off. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Eubank approaches the fight. Can he be that attritional guy anymore after he just got knocked out? You know, Chris Eubank Jr. was able to come forward, let his hands go because he knew he had a granite chin. Now he knows he doesn't. Any chin can be cracked, and we saw it cracked in spectacular fashion in the first fight. So I'm not sure being more cautious is actually what Chris Eubank Jr. needs in this fight. But having said that, the flip side is if he gets close and he gets hit again, how's he going to hold up? Arthur Thompson, big up Arthur Thompson every time. Who do you think wins the main event tomorrow? Look, after the first fight, I don't see how you can really back against Liam Smith with any kind of conviction. I know that there's a lot of talk about, Chris Eubank Jr. Did he overlook him? Was there an elbow? Was he dead at the weight for the Conor Benn weight cut? The facts are he got stopped in 4 rounds in pretty, emphatic fashion. There wasn't an awful lot that you can take from that fight if you're a Chris Eubank Jr. fan. I know Chris Eubank said that he dominated the first 3 rounds of the fight. I wouldn't necessarily say that. I felt like he was 2 rounds to 1 up after 3 rounds, but a very, very early stage of the fight. Where Liam Smith, as we all know, throughout his whole career, grows into the fight and grows into the fight as it goes on. So I think you have to look at Liam Smith here. I think he is rightfully the favourite this time around, but of course doesn't mean that he's going to emerge victorious tomorrow night. Obviously, guys, let us know who you think is going to win. Is it going to be Chris Eubank Jr.? Is it going to be revenge for him, or will it be repeat for Liam Smith? Let us know in the comments, and please press that like and subscribe buttons. Alex Old, the one and only Alex Olds. Marku going to get the job done? Yeah, I think so, but I think Marku is... with all due respect, and I don't want him to fill me in the next time I'm up in Steel City, he does have a lot of developing still to do. Dylan Moran was a decent amateur, good fighter. I think Marku, you would have to back him to get the job done, but we've seen some pretty up and down performances from him in his last few fights. Obviously had that good win over Chris Jenkins, but then was a bit up and down, quite literally, in Albania. Got dropped heavily in that fight. So you never really know what you're going to get from Florian Marku, which I think is kind of the mystique and the allure, and one of the reasons why we tune in to watch him, because he can do anything at any given moment, as we saw in his face-off with Dylan Moran. So yeah, I think Marku will back himself to win that fight, but as we always kind of find ourselves seeing in Florian Marku fights, I'm not expecting him to have it all his own way. Dr. Dracart asks, thoughts on Spence activating the rematch clause? Yeah, I mean, I'm not hugely surprised because of the scale of the first fight and how much money that Errol Spence can prove to earn in the rematch. So I'm not surprised that he's taken it. Is it the best thing for him from a boxing perspective? I guess we're going to have to wait and see. By all accounts, it looks as though that rematch might happen at 154 pounds. We were over in Vegas for Spence Crawford. Got to get the plug in always. I really like the hats. Davis Garcia, that one. Anyway, where Terence Crawford said after the fight, look, if he wants to do 154, we can do 154. Terence Crawford's not stupid. He understands that that's probably going to be by far and away the biggest payday for him as well. And, why would you not want to fight a guy again after you've stopped them in such one-sided fashion? So I'm not necessarily sure it's the right thing for Errol Spence to do. I was quite, I wouldn't say vocal, but when we did our post-fight analysis, our post-fight review, it's difficult to see kind of what Errol Spence's career is like at this stage now. He's obviously had the well-documented issues outside the ring, the car crashes, the eye injury, and what is he coming back for? I'm pretty sure he's made plenty of money, and I know he will be obviously keen to avenge that loss to Terence Crawford, but it was such a one-sided fight that I'm not surprised it's happening. I would be surprised if people behind the scenes had maybe not tried to talk Spence out of it and potentially going to 154 to box a Keith Thurman or someone like that. Both guys who are naturally welterweights and can go up to 154. Just going to stop rambling on because we've got Mark Heffron versus Jack Cullen, both hitting the scales at the minute. Really, really good fight for the British and Commonwealth super middleweight titles. Mark Heffron, of course, now back with Joe Gallagher. Jack Cullen with the Jennings, who also used to work with Mark Heffron. That's a really, really good fight. Local rivalry, local derby. Oldham versus Little Lever. So I expect that one to catch fire. You've got two guys there who like to throw their hands. But yeah, back to Dr. Dracott's point. I'm not surprised that Spence activated the rematch clause. I cannot see how the fight goes a different way considering how one-sided the first one was. Josh Taylor, probably still up there despite the loss. George obviously asking about the UK pound for pound top 5, and you are correct, sir. Yes, Josh Taylor was part of that top 5 as well. Please don't tell Josh Taylor I left him out of the top 5. I don't fancy him chasing me down and beating me to a pulp. Tim Bartholomew, Eubank seemed a lot quieter and more humble in the press conference. Doesn't seem to have the same confidence from the past. Who knows? I think Eubank is an enigma. You don't really know what you're going to get from him. There are fight weeks where he's been somewhat more removed, and he is quite a quiet character anyway. He doesn't often shout his mouth off. Just looking at Mark Heffron and Jack Cullen, rather. Mark Heffron trying to give him the scare at the face-off, but Jack Cullen is a bit too long in the tooth for that. Really good fight there. I really, really liked that fight. I was politely reprimanded by Dave Jennings on Twitter yesterday. He basically told me I didn't know what I was talking about when I picked Mark Heffron to win that fight. But it's all love for the Jennings family and, of course, for Jack Cullen as well. It's a fight that I'm really, really looking forward to. It's people like you get me in trouble, you see. You ask me for my opinion on these fights. I give it, and then I have to duck and dive. Otherwise, I get beaten up by trainers and fighters. But yeah, going back to Eubank, maybe he's... I mean, don't want to read too much into somebody like Chris Eubank Jr., who is quite stoic at the best of times. But potentially he is, not as confident as he was beforehand. When you have an uncrackable chin, you kind of dine out on that and you pride yourself on that. It's got to be quite a harrowing feeling to be knocked out in the fashion that he was. Whether or not that impacts on the way that he approaches tomorrow night, I'm quite sure it will. But let's see. Heavyweight contest now, up onto the scales. Dave Allen weighing in for his bout with Frazer Clarke. £18 stone, 5 pounds for Dave Allen, which is a pretty good weight for him. We obviously haven't seen Dave Allen box at the top level since his bout with David Price back in July of 2019. 18.5, so £257 for Dave Allen. So it's about a stone heavier than he was when he boxed David Price. Well documented that he had some weight issues the other way for that fight. Came into that fight pretty light, Dave Allen. Frazer Clarke now jumping on the scales as well. £19 stone 4 for Frazer Clarke. So about a stone in difference in the weight for Frazer Clarke against Dave Allen. I am chirping alongside the weigh-in. Let's have a look at the face-off here. Not expecting too many fireworks between Frazer Clarke and Dave Allen. Two quite laid-back characters. I think they know each other very well as well. Dave Allen spent many years sparring up at the English Institute of Sport with all of the GB guys. So they're very friendly, as we saw at the workout and as we saw at the press conference. All business, as they say, between Dave Allen and Frazer Clarke. Don't forget to get your questions in. Just having a look at the face-off. Frazer Clarke, of course, naturally the bigger man. Just having a look, just drinking it in. Shame that we couldn't get there. Shout out National Rail every time. Quite a long face-off here between Frazer Clarke and Dave Allen. Two quite cool customers, but neither one of them want to break first. Both having a look. I think Dave Allen wins that one. Dave Allen is the last to look away. But look, I mean, that fight is going to have a lot of question marks around it. We've not seen Dave Allen anywhere near this level for the last 4 years. Has had a few low-key comeback fights since he announced his retirement and goes in there, a sizable underdog, it has to be said, against Frazer Clarke, who has been active, has been busy in recent years, while Dave Allen hasn't, unfortunately, been very busy or active. Alex Old says, what's your all-time top 5 pound for pound? Come on, Alex Old. We've only got about an hour and a half. We've got about an hour and a half. It'll probably take the whole of that to do that. Off the top of my head, Sugar Ray Robinson, Henry Armstrong, Ezra Charles, Muhammad Ali, top 5. So who did I go with? I went with, I've forgotten already. Ray Robinson, Henry Armstrong, Ezra Charles. I don't know. We'll have to sort out the rest in a minute. Easier questions to manage rather than that. I have to get out like charts and all sorts, man. Like, yeah, top 5 pound for pound of all time. That's probably a podcast actually. Alex, you have to join us. Although you'll have like Carl Froch, Lee Woods, anybody else from Nottingham would probably comprise your top 5 pound for pound. George, I'd be looking forward to the rematch with the hope it would be what we were expecting the first time. It's an interesting point. I mean, I'm looking forward to this fight more than I was the first fight. I think because of what we saw in January. Look, I'm not there was plenty of people who picked Liam Smith to beat Chris Eubank Jr. There were some, not a huge amount, some who picked Liam Smith to potentially win by stoppage in the second half of the fight. I didn't see anybody. Now you the people might be able to correct me, but I didn't see anybody predicting Liam Smith to win by early stoppage. So there's the intrigue in this fight for me. We've seen Chris Eubank Jr. take fully fledged shots from big super middleweights like George Groves. We've seen him walk through the fire time and time again. Little old Liam Smith, with all due respect, coming up from 154 pounds, who's not known as a massive puncher at that weight. As Barry Jones said, big up Barry Jones, he can punch his weight, but not a huge concussive one-punch knockout artist. To see him virtually render Chris Eubank Jr. Not quite unconscious, but certainly not with his senses, was really something to see. I'd actually picked a fairly boring, mundane decision win for Chris Eubank Jr. the first time around. Now I can't see this fight going the distance. I no doubt will live to regret saying that. So shoe in now for a 12-round bore fest. But I can't see the fight going the distance this time around. I think there's too much at stake. I can't see Chris Eubank Jr. being able to fight 12 rounds at pace now. I think he's looked quite slight this week as well. I mentioned earlier on about him not quite having that same physicality, that same robustness, coming down from 168 pounds to 160. And, we've not seen him early in his career. I think everybody confuses Eubank as a busy fighter. Attritional is the word that I like to use with him, where he kind of grinds you down. But he doesn't do it for 3 minutes of every round. He kind of fights in bursts, goes for a walk, has a little pose, and has a little kind of breather, really, and then goes again. Against Liam Smith, who's so experienced and so good at making you work when he wants you to work and when you don't want to work. Going to be really interesting to see how Chris Eubank Jr.'s gas tank is in the second half of the fight, if of course we make it that far. We didn't last time, and Liam Smith will have his own ideas going into the rematch. Daniel Gregg, big up Daniel Gregg, the main man himself, Big Dan, Dan G, Top G, says, what's your thoughts on Eubank's mental state going into the fight? Not really sure. I kind of mentioned previously that, Eubank has always been quite a stoic character, he's always been quite brooding, doesn't speak an awful lot about his emotion. He did a fantastic interview with Gary Neville on the Overlap recently. We're giving out plugs on all of these other channels at the minute, but that's fine. We really enjoyed the interview, and I thought he spoke really, really well, Chris Eubank Jr. Just as we get the weigh in here for Adam Azim and Aram Fanyan. Sorry, been a long week. There we go, shaking hands. Adam Azim, all respect. Good fight for Adam Azim here as he kind of closes in on around that European title level. Frank Petitjean, the current champion. Let's shake. There we go. Nice and easy one there for Ben Shalom. Doesn't have to do any doorman work for that one. And we are now waiting for Chris Eubank Jr. and Liam Smith to hit the scales. The main event, of course, tomorrow night. So, the stream has gone down. So join us here on 101 Boxing. And make sure you hit the like, comment, and subscribe button. But going back to Dan's question, thoughts on Eubank mental state going into this fight? I think he will be under no illusions that this is a must-win fight, as every fight is once you get to this level. But the manner in which he lost the first fight, having an uncrackable chin, which... of course, no such thing exists, but having what was up to that point an uncrackable chin, and all of a sudden having that removed from you in less than 4 rounds, that has to take something out of a fighter. It really does. Ideal next step for Adam Azim if he wins tomorrow, asked Dr. Draycott. European title, like somewhere around there. I think Enoch Paulson is boxing Frank Petitjean. They're boxing again for the European title, 140 pounds. Someone like that. Mohamed Mamoun is a name that we were talking about on the boxing show recently. So someone like that, I think, someone sort of fringe European level. I don't think Adam Azim will be boxing for a British title. So I think that's the route that he'll go. Of course, navigated by the McGuigans, pretty good at matchmaking over the last few years, the McGuigans. So I'll be interested to see who they go for next. But I think someone like Mohamed Mamoun, someone European level-ish, which I think Aram Fanyan is as well. JF asks, if Alan wins, would you favour him against Wardley? I mean, if is a big word in this instance. Obviously, he's a sizable underdog against Fraser Clark. We'll have to see how he looks tomorrow night. If he is indeed able to get the win, then, that is a massive win for Dave Allen at this stage of his career. It has to be said. But I think we'd probably have to wait and see what it looks like before then. I think Fabio Wardley's going to be boxing David Adelaide making a defense of the British heavyweight title. I think that fight is going to happen at some point before the end of the year. So we'll wait and see. Ask me again on Sunday morning, JF. Tim Bartholomew, is Fraser Clark actually going to make it at top level, or is he being protected by Boxer because he's not quite top tier talent? Anybody who wins an Olympic medal, anyone who spends the amount of time that Fraser Clark did at the top level of the amateur game, both in the World Series of Boxing and competing in all of the top level tournaments around the world, is a good fighter. There's no way of getting around it. I think people kind of misinterpret Fraser Clark's age a little bit. I think people see the fact that he stayed amateur for quite a while and make out that he's 50 years old. He's still relatively fresh in a professional boxing terms. Of course, he does have wear and tear, which I think is part of the problem for Fraser Clark so far in his professional career. He hasn't been able to get that momentum. He started to pick it up recently. I do think 10 rounds against Mariusz Vach was a very worthwhile exercise. Anybody who boxes Mariusz Vach before they've had 10 or 11 fights, I think is more than adequate for that stage of your development. Fraser Clark had a very, quite painful, quite serious hand injury at the back end of last year, so that slowed him down a little bit. But of course, we saw at times he didn't have that stellar opposition. They quite literally pulled somebody out of the crowd for his professional debut, which was pretty wild when you think about it, let's be honest. But I think Fraser Clark is more than happy ticking along at his pace. And yeah, I'm quite sure Boxer believe he is top tier talent. But when you've made a big investment into a heavyweight, people may not like it. I certainly don't like it. I want to see the best fights and fighters taking the biggest opportunities. But promoters will try and navigate them in a route that works for the promoter. They're the ones who are putting up the money. So I don't necessarily think that that Boxer don't believe he's quite top tier talent. And I think it's early days for Fraser Clark. Not everybody's going to be Lomachenko coming out of the amateurs and boxing for world titles within 2 or 3 fights. That was about Spence Crawford, by the way, but still, yeah, looking forward to tomorrow more than the first, even though I picked Smith first time. Oh, okay, right, I get you now, George. Yeah, that was about Spence Crawford, by the way. So, I mean, I don't see how the rematch goes any different for Spence Crawford. Similarly, really, to Liam Smith and Chris Eubank. I can definitely see a route to victory for Chris Eubank Jr. I can't really see one for Errol Spence, considering how one-sided the first fight was. Daniel Cartwright asks, is British boxing being hampered with there now being so many promoters / TV networks, fighters scattered, which means less bigger fight nights, in my opinion? Yeah, I think you're onto something there, Dan. If you don't mind me calling you Dan. Daniel. I think that there's Wasserman. A few years back, there was basically, with respect to the other promoters, don't want to get any angry phone calls, there was Matchroom and there was Queensberry, there was BT, there was Sky. Whereas now we do have more pockets of space. Less pockets of space, more pockets of promoters, which is great for fighters because there's more opportunities out there, and competition is very healthy. It's something that boxing has that MMA doesn't have. Of course, the UFC have pretty much a stranglehold on MMA. But it does mean that more politics, more promoters, more money, more people investing into the sport want to protect their investment. So, yeah, I think the last 12 months, the last 18 months really have been as bad politically as certainly the time that I've been working in boxing. Something that I actually spoke to Fraser Clark about. Make sure you check out the full interview on One-on-One Boxing when I sat down with Big Fraser. I do feel like it is bad at the minute, and I don't think we are seeing the fights that we need to see. Boxing is not the Premier League. Boxing is not something that we can kind of drip feed to an audience. In order for boxing to be thriving and successful, we need big events, we need big fights, and at the minute we're not getting that many over in the UK. It has to be said. That's why I have to keep going abroad for all of these big events. I'm much too lazy for that, but anyway, I think you're onto something, Daniel. Tim Bartholomew, should promoters come up with something a bit more original for fight week? Yes. Boxers shadow boxing in a public ring doesn't seem to do much. Nope. For fight profile seems like a bit of a tired format. I completely agree with you. I think look, a public workout, if you've got, quite often you see them in public places if you need to sell tickets, and it does add to it, but it doesn't really add much to it by that point when you've got fighters doing their, they're basically making weight already. Like some of those fighters that you see doing the shadow out there, they haven't drunk anything for a day. They haven't eaten anything for 2 or 3 days. By the time the Wednesday comes around, the harsh reality of boxing, unfortunately. It's not the case for everybody, but when it's the Wednesday of fight week, sometimes the last thing a fighter wants to do, might be carrying an injury as well, is go out there and do a fully fledged, full-blooded pad workout. Maybe the workout needs to be moved, maybe to the right at the very start of the week. But yeah, definitely something needs to be done. I know Boxer did like the press conference and the workout on the same day. So like Wednesday, so rather than doing a Wednesday, they were doing like a double bubble on Thursday and then the weigh-in on Friday. How fighters responded to that, whether they liked it or not. Obviously, it means that Thursday is a little bit busier than previously, and obviously the Thursday is the day before the weigh-in. It's quite, one of the reasons why you see a lot of fighters going at each other at the press conference, because they're all hungry and none of them have drunk anything and they're all nil by mouth by that point. But yeah, absolutely is something that needs to be looked at, I think, Tim. I don't think that we have enough different content, which is why we're bringing it to you here on One-on-One Boxing. This is why we're doing the weigh-in in, because like the weigh-ins are all boring now. Sorry guys, but they are. So you'd have to join us. We'll keep you entertained. Don't worry about it. Hit that subscribe button. There we go. Let's go, champ. Alex Old, Lee Wood, Warrington, thoughts please, champ. I think Josh Warrington. No, I'm joking. It's a really good fight. It's a really good fight, and I think Josh Warrington is being written off a little bit too much here. I think his narrow points loss to Luis Venado Lopez, Luis Alberto Lopez, Venado Lopez, Venado being his nickname, back in December of last year, I think has aged pretty well. I think it's aged pretty well. Venado Lopez came over and really put a beating on Michael Conlan in a fight where a lot of people, myself included, thought that was a decent style matchup for Michael Conlan. Didn't prove that way as Luis Alberto Lopez ran through and really showed heavy hands, punching power. Josh Warrington had been out of the ring for a little while before he boxed Luis Alberto Lopez. Didn't look hurt throughout that fight. In fact, kind of clawed his way into it late on in the fight. So I do feel like Josh Warrington is being overlooked here. Of course, hasn't had the best period of his career since the pandemic, really. I think, obviously, the pandemic was terrible for a lot of people for a lot of reasons, fighters included, but I'm not really sure there was too many fighters as badly affected by the pandemic as Josh Warrington. Vacated his title, then got knocked out by Mauricio Lara, had the rematch, then there was the head clash. Yeah, won the titles back against Kiko Martinez and then lost them next time out. So been up and down for Warrington, but he has been boxing in good company at a good level. He obviously was stopped by Mauricio Lara, but so was Lee Wood in their first fight. So really interesting fight. If I had to put my last Rolo on it, I would probably lean towards Lee Wood, being the form fighter. But I think style-wise, it's a good fight as well, because Lee Wood is a good puncher and a good boxer. Josh Warrington has a very good chin, good at getting on the inside, good at roughing fighters up and making it uncomfortable for them. Going to be a good fight. Really, really good fight. I'm really very much looking forward to Lee Wood versus Josh Warrington. Eat, Sleep, Boxing, Repeat. Is this another new channel, Tebbutt? Yes, it is. It's One-on-One Boxing. And we're here for you, man. We're here for you every Friday. Well, for the Fridays that count. Weighing in here, well, live, whether we get there, depends on the trains, apparently. But yeah, this is another new channel. But of course, you can still get all of your latest and greatest on Boxing News, Boxing News Plus. Hit all of the subscribe buttons everywhere along the line. And you'll get everything that you want. Lots of different content on here. Anyone seen the cheat days of Chris Eubank? That's the type of vibe we're going for here on One-on-One Boxing. A little bit more, I don't know, YouTuber-y content, maybe? I don't know. Seems like if you say YouTuber content, people don't like that. But you get a lot of content on One-on-One Boxing, as you do, of course, on Boxing News and Boxing News Plus. But anyway, now the plug section of today's live is out of the way. There's 29 of you in here, so we're slowly but surely creeping up on the nearly 11,000 that are watching on Sky Sports Boxing. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you get your questions in, so it's just not me talking really fast like I'm at an auction. Charlie says, I assume it says if Mark Heffron wins and looks good, given the tie-up of the belts at 168, who would you like to see him fight next? I quite liked the Zach Chelly fight for Mark Heffron, but obviously now that's not really going to happen because, of course, Mark Jeffers beat Zach Chelly. I don't really know, but 168 pounds is kind of wide open at the minute. It is wide open. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens to those titles. I think Canelo, of course, is boxing Jamal Charlo. I don't see any of the governing bodies queuing up to strip Canelo Alvarez if he so decides that he wants to keep hold of those belts. If, of course, he is victorious against Jermell Charlo, which is no foregone conclusion. Just getting through some of the other questions that we've got here. But yeah, Mark Jeffers. That could be a good opponent for him. But if he's looking further afield than that, you're kind of looking at European level. 168 pounds. A fight that I would quite like, and I think stylistically would be an interesting watch, but that would not happen, is Mark Heffron versus Lerone Richards. I think Lerone Richards is really good. Really, really good. And going to be really difficult to beat. But if you're Mark Heffron and you've just beaten somebody on a pay-per-view undercard in a great fight, let's say, why do you want to box Lerone Richards, who has the style and the skill to make anybody look terrible on any given night? So, good question, to be fair. 168 pounds is very much wide open at the minute. I say if Heffron wins, maybe someone like Anthony Durrell. Can't necessarily see Anthony Durrell wanting to take that fight. Of course, he's a former world champion, boxers on PBC. But yeah, I think someone like that. But lots of options, I think, for Mark Heffron, who's in a good little vein of form. Good fighter, Mark Heffron. Eat, Sleep, Box and Repeat. It's not the best card I've ever seen, but is this boxer's best card to date? I'd have to say yes. Nothing really jumps out at me from some of the stuff that we've seen from Boxer in the last 18 months, in a sense of kind of the whole card and having the build-up that this fight has. I think the main event here is very, very interesting. And there's some really good fights on the undercard. But I think probably. I can't remember too much from the Kell Brook Amir Khan undercard. I know and Adam Azim was on there. Vidal Riley was on there. But I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, just a prospect card really outside of the main event, which of course is what everybody was paying their money for. So yeah, not the best card I've ever seen either, but a pretty good card from Boxer. I'm looking forward to it. There's a few fights on there that I'm fairly intrigued by. George Fraser says, agree, when it was mainly just Matchroom and Queensberry cards were definitely deeper in quality. Better matches were made more regularly. Yep, I agree. We are just about to get the weigh-in up and underway here. Please don't go over it. I'll just talk you through it. Just stay here. Click the like button. Oh, there we go. Just knocking over the Path and Sport glove. Big up Path and Sport every time. Yeah, you get Path and Sport in there. Okay, Chris Eubank Jr. walking to the stage now. Of course, the underdog walking to the stage first this time as well, after Liam Smith won that first fight. Liam Smith, I think, has really enjoyed having those A-side privileges this week. You can just see it out of him. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Tony Bellew and David Haye, where Tony Bellew had the rematch after the first fight and was like, look, you're dancing to my tune now. Eubank looking very confident, very relaxed. Not sure, was there a weigh-in beforehand? Is this the ceremonial weigh-in? What are we doing here? Eubank Jr., the number 7, got the Man United top on. Is that the Man United top? He's green. What's going on? There we go. I'm not massively hot on football, to be honest with you. I don't know what shirt that is. I think it's a Man United shirt. Jordan's it's a Man United shirt. There we go. Yes, I knew. It's fine. We're just going to slow things down while we watch these guys get on the scales. Not sure if they've already weighed in, though. I'm not sure if they've already weighed in. Is this a ceremonial weigh-in, or is this the real one? I like the real ones, man. Like, I don't like the proper weigh-ins and the ceremonial ones. I like to see him tight at the weight and really, getting in there. So Eubank. Here it comes. 11 stone, 5 pounds and 5 ounces for Chris Eubank Jr., which is inside the 11 stone 6 middleweight limit. So he's made the weight. I did think that Chris Eubank was looking a little bit tight earlier this week. It was one of the first things that I thought when I saw him at the workout. I thought that just hasn't, again, that robustness, the neck muscles, the shoulder muscles. Since he come down from 168, I'm not too sure about him physically, Chris Eubank Jr. It's something that we spoke about at times in the past. And obviously we saw some evidence of him not quite being as robust, as solid when Liam Smith knocked him out in spectacular fashion last time out. Liam Smith, another guy who's big at the weight. Look, I mean, Liam Smith is a 154-pounder, but he said to me before the first fight, I never see 160. I go from 164, 165, and I straight down to 154. So, this isn't going to be an easy weight cut for Liam Smith either. Also had a back injury in the build-up to this. Has that affected Liam Smith's preparation? Always looks pretty comfortable. No, this is definitely the real weigh-in. You can tell sometimes by looking at the fighters. Here we go, Liam Smith. Big smile on his face. We'll be getting on to the questions that we've got in the live chat just after we've seen Liam Smith jumping on the scales. Just about to wait, listening to George Groves, the dulcet tones of George Groves. Big up George Groves. Check out the George Groves Boxing Club podcast, wherever you get your podcasts every Wednesday. Liam Smith. £11 stone 6. So Liam Smith bang on the weight at £160. Chris Eubank Jr. 11 stone 5 pounds 5 ounces. So both men, we have a fight on one-on-one boxing. Not on one-on-one boxing. It'll be at Manchester Arena. If anyone fancies it, you can have it. Come down to the studio. We'll get it cracking. No problem. But anyway, waiting for the face-off here. Come on, bit of spice in the weigh-in. Bit of spice in the face-off. Always adds to it, doesn't it? You got to have those big weigh-in vibes. Which is why I don't like it if they weigh in at 9 in the morning and by the time you see them, they've had like a McDonald's or whatever. I don't know, man. I don't know what they're going to rehydrate with. But let's have a look. Johnny Nelson saying that Chris Eubank Jr. looks better for this fight on the scales than he did for the last fight. Hindsight is a wonderful thing, of course, in boxing. But he does look okay. I did think earlier on in the week Eubank did look tight, but he does look pretty good today. Okay, we've got the ads now. Got the ads coming up. So we've got 6 seconds of rambling to do before we get back and we see the face-off. Wonder if that's a tactical ad break because they know we're going to watch it. We want to see the face-off, don't we? We want to see him pushing and shoving, a little bit of a push, little push and a pull. Let's see what we get. Last face-off was a bit spicy. Liam Smith just waiting there with his brother Paul Smith and Declan O'Rourke, part of that training team in Rotunda. The Rotunda Boxing Club in Liverpool. Would always recommend giving that a look if you're ever in the area and you're a big boxing fan. Quality place to go and watch some fighters train. Here we go. Liam Smith and Chris Eubank Jr. about to face off here. Oh, they're keeping us waiting. The suspense. Oh, I thought Calla was going to face off with him there. I don't think Calla's making him to wait anytime soon. Here we go. Here we go. Straight in. Very close. No words yet from Liam Smith and Chris Eubank Jr. Of course, shared a few yesterday at the press conference. Really a lot on the line here, particularly for Chris Eubank Jr. It's difficult to see where Chris Eubank Jr. goes with a loss here. With a win, maybe Liam Smith versus Chris Eubank Jr. 3. Who knows? Stranger things have happened in this strange of strange sports. Long face off here. We like that. Have I got any crap tattoos like Liam Smith? Yeah, I have actually. Not saying that Liam Smith's tattoos are crap, obviously. But I have one. Yeah, one crap tattoo. Thanks. Okay, all weighed in. Face off, all done. Yeah, Eubank doesn't look drawn in the face, but he does look, he always has looked incredibly lean at 160 pounds. But now at 34 years of age, after flirting at 168 pounds for a few fights. Now a bit of the verbals going here. Eubank rubbing the hands together. Here we go. The talking continues. Eubank looks nice and relaxed, but he is an unruffleable character. Okay, and that is all we've got time for. Well, not all we've got time for. All they've got time for. We're here for another hour or so at least. Right, I can get back to some of the questions now. Thanks very much for everybody who's got them in and waited for me while I've watched the weigh-in, which is, yeah, there we go. But anyway, let's get back to it. So we've got Paul K. Smith Eubank, fight of the year contender in the making. So many variables. Eubank demon, Smith injury. Plus he put on a lot of timber prior to camp. Really intriguing. Looking forward to it. Top card too. Paul, you're selling it to me, mate. I'm all in. I'm all in, Paul. Yeah, fight of the year contender. Let's go, champ. Yeah. No, I thought the first fight would be boring. So, I mean, it didn't go the way that I expected it to. I think there are a lot of variables in this. I think the variables are more on Chris Eubank. Liam Smith can get heavy, has got heavy in between a lot of the fights in the past. He has had ample preparation time for this. I don't think either of them at this stage of their career are really over the moon with having to make weight at all. So I'm not sure how much the weight will be a factor for Liam Smith. For Chris Eubank, there is, for me, a question mark. After dropping down from 168 to 160, we had the very well-documented cut for the Conor Benn fight. That didn't happen, of course. So it's going to be interesting to see how Eubank looks. Liam Smith was very matter-of-fact the day after the fight. He said he was terrified of being hit. He said that he was pulling up with his chin in the air and he was terrified of being hit. Maybe Chris Eubank Jr. knows something that we don't, but we'll have to see for sure tomorrow night. 32 of you now in the chat. Make sure you please hit the like button, subscribe. We're trying to get our subscriber base up here on one-on-one boxing. So drop us a sub if you like the content. And even if you don't, just drop a little sub and forget about it. But of course you will. Anyway, Jordan Pollock says, what's the best boxing trip of your life? Ooh, good question from Jordan Pollock. I really liked Wilder Fury 1. Wilder Fury 1 was a great trip. It was in LA. It was on my first time covering a big show in America. It was kind of Wilder Fury 2 was a bit more corporate. You had ESPN and Fox, and it was a little bit more, kind of proper, should we say. Whereas the first fight was kind of all over the place, which I was there for, Queensbury were promoting Tyson Fury at the time. This is before ESPN. And yeah, we didn't know what we were going to get from Fury, and he turned up as he often does and kind of caused a ruckus and shouted and screamed and did this and did that. And then the fight itself was unbelievable. I'll forever remember Tyson Fury crashing to the canvas in the 12th round, getting ready to type. Well, not getting ready. I typed out a tweet. Deontay Wilder has knocked out Tyson, and then he got up. Still to this day, can't remember and can't understand how he got up. I still don't know how he got up. But I'd probably say that. I enjoyed going out to the WBC convention last year, but yeah, Wilder Fury 1 was big. That was a great event. Charlie, where would a charismatic and erudite boxing fan be able to send a CV and cover letter to the BN020? Oh, come on, Charlie. I can't take your thing now, but I tell you what, drop us a DM on Twitter, and if you're any good, we'll get back to you. And if you're not, please like, comment, and subscribe. What can I say? Anyway, Eat, Sleep, Boxing, Repeat says, nice one, subscribe. Thank you very much. Dan is fine. I'm from Andy's neck of the woods. I should be talking to you like this then. Anyway, I'm hearing of a Wolverhampton card at the Refurb Civic, headlined by Whittaker against Summers, depending on your fight. Have you heard anything? I have heard that there will be a show in the region sometime soon. And Ricky Summers' fight, for me, should have already happened for Ben Whittaker. I think that is a very good fight for him. But anyway, keep the questions coming in, says us, one-on-one boxing. Yeah, big up one-on-one boxing. Kieran P, has Eubank Jr. fell out with his father? You never seem to see him around fight week anymore. I don't know. I don't profess to know the inner workings of the Eubank family, of course. A terrible tragedy in the family, I think about 18 months ago with the untimely passing of Sebastian Eubank, Chris's brother, and of course Chris Sr.'s son. I don't think that Chris Eubank Sr., as any parent would, has taken that all that well. I don't want to say too much. So yeah, I'm not really sure. It's a shame though. I say it's a shame. What he's gone through and what the family have gone through. A far bigger shame than us not seeing Chris Eubank Sr. around boxing shows anymore. But for me, one of my favourite people to be around in boxing. Always a pleasure to have Eubank Sr. in the building, and everything that comes with him. Before we move on from that, I was going to tell the last time I saw Chris Eubank Sr. Was the day after Wilder Fury 2 in Las Vegas, so February the something or other in 2020, before the world fell off. I went up to him in the MGM Grand lobby, And I said, oh, hello, English, because he likes to be called English for people that know. And he said, oh, Rob. And he looked me up and down. He went, you've put on quite a bit of weight. So that was the last time I saw Chris Eubank Sr. But big him up every time. Always a pleasure. Hopefully we see him around soon. I think he's a great character and he's great for the sport. Whether you like him or not, boxing needs characters. This isn't table tennis. This isn't cricket. We need big characters. It's the fight game. It's the fight game. We've got to have the big characters. Anyway, Paul K, best boxing trip. Oh, I've already done that one. Wilder Fury 1 for me. But look, there's been loads, man. I'm very, very fortunate to do my job. I love my job. Even the shit trips are still great. So yeah, it's much better than having a real job. Daniel Gregg, if Eubank was to win this one, would you like to see a trilogy or would you rather see them both move on? I think it depends on the fight, Dan. I do think it depends on the fight. I think it would make some sense, Smith-Eubank 3, but I think if Chris Eubank wins this fight, we had a question earlier about what could come next for Liam Smith. I think if Eubank wins, I think that Conor Benn fight will happen. If he gets stopped again, I understand what Eddie Hearn says about that fight always being there, but if Eubank gets stopped again, back-to-back stoppage losses by somebody moving up in weight, then I think that puts pay to it. But yeah, depending on the fight. If the fight's good tomorrow, maybe Eubank picks himself up off the canvas and stops Liam Smith, or a bit of controversy, maybe some controversy in Eubank's favour, then maybe we see a trilogy bout. But I do think that if Eubank wins, that he goes and fights Conor Benn somewhere. I don't know. But anyway. Charlie, come to think of Heffron versus Poddy McCrory, be a shot. Yeah, Poddy McCrory's a good fighter, can punch really hard, was up at light heavyweight. He boxed recently, didn't he, Poddy McCrory? Let me see, did he lose? No, he didn't. Oh, that was it. Oh yeah, he boxed Steed Woodall, yeah. Yeah, went over and stopped Leon Bunn at light heavyweight. Yeah, Poddy McCrory's a good fighter. Sorry for suggesting that he may have lost, he definitely didn't. Good fighter, can punch. Good fight, that. Two guys who can really punch. Yeah, I like that, Charlie. Good one. Eat, Sleep, Box and Repeat says, does Eubank call it a day if he loses? I don't know. I think it depends on the fashion in which he loses. If he gets stopped again and, potentially there is something that we don't know about, maybe his punch resistance has gone, maybe he is getting hurt in the gym, who knows? No one really knows. Then yeah, I think he might. Because fighters like Chris Eubank Jr. Command a certain to box, and if they're not able to get that, then there are easier ways to earn your money. Chris Eubank Jr. has made plenty of money in his time. I think he'd rather sit at the poker tables of Las Vegas than get punched in the face, and who wouldn't, let's be honest. But anyway, moving on. Got any crap tattoos like Liam Smith? I'm not saying Liam Smith tattoos are crap at all, but I definitely have one crap tattoo. So, yeah. Lewis Moore says, big up, Rob. Hate the fact I have to ask this question, but does Clark have a rematch clause for Allen? I don't know, Lewis. I don't know. Hopefully not, because, that would be something, wouldn't it? Let's be honest. But I hope not. But I haven't asked. But, yeah. Something that irritates me, says Dan Cartwright. I'm all for the irritated shouts. Let's go. Let's have a moan, Dan Cartwright. Something that irritates me. Why do promoters, mainly Hearn, there we go, stand in the middle during a face-off? I've noticed this week that Ben Shalom takes a step back. Yeah, Ben kind of goes there, he gets the photo, and then he runs off, which I always find quite strange because he's constantly going back and forth, really, whereas Eddie just kind of stays there and he's got like that. Like everyone has like a stock smile or a stock look when somebody goes, smile, and you give it the... And you can kind of do it any time. Hearn's got that, hasn't he? Just got the... But yeah, I don't know. It's not something that used to happen all the time. But obviously happens a little bit more frequently now. The one that gets me is the promoter doing the ring walk. I don't know why the promoter needs to do the ring walk. That's strange to me. The promoter being in the middle of the fighters... Yeah, however you kind of look at that, but should a promoter be walking to the ring with the fighters like they're going to fight? I'm not always sure, but then again, who cares? But yeah, like the moan, and don't forget, guys, if you got any moans like Daniel Cartwright to promoters stand in the middle annoy you, let us know. But ask us some questions. Okay, Colin 1982 says, people always go on about the best wins by a Brit abroad. Brooke Porter, Fury Wilder, Hunnigan Curry. But what about Americans winning over here? Spence versus Brooke, that is the first that springs to mind. Yeah, Spence versus Brooke is the first that springs to mind. There was also Terence Crawford recently. Not recently. Terence Crawford came over recently, it was his first world title when he beat Ricky Burns. That was another great win from somebody coming over to these shores. Oliver McCall coming over and knocking out Lennox Lewis. That was a pretty big win for Oliver McCall. Just trying to go through it. Right, I think we've got some questions in here. So we're gonna go through some of the Twitter questions. Don't forget to get yours in there, guys. Here on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We are about half an hour or so before I am joined by Declan Taylor, the one and only Declan Taylor. Rob, thoughts on Boxeo versus Aziz? Could I push you for a prediction? You can always push me for a prediction. It's part of my job to try and make sense of this crazy old sport. I think I'd lean towards Joshua Boxeo. Joshua Boxeo is the higher ceiling commodity, but we haven't seen that, and I think it's a very interesting fight for Joshua Boxeo because I think we've already had this fight for him in a way against Craig Richards. Dan Aziz has done very, very well. I remember interviewing Dan Aziz after he won his first title. And he's taken everything step by step by step by step. And you have to really respect somebody like Dan Aziz who has done it that way in this kind of new advent. He's not jumped on social media to try and shoehorn his name into a fight that he doesn't deserve, which we see more and more nowadays. Dan Aziz has gone through the rankings and gone through and earned his shot, but he is an underdog, and he'd be the first to admit he's an underdog against Joshua Boxeo. I will go for Joshua Boxeo on points in that. But look, if he's not at it, Joshua Boxeo, and he didn't look good in his last fight against Pavel Stepien, Dan Aziz is a man in form, and a man in form is difficult to beat, but I will go for Joshua Boxeo in that fight. Something that annoys me, Manuel Charr being reinstated as a regular champ. I mean, weren't the WBA getting rid of the regular belts, belt consolidation or whatever they were calling it? Yeah, I mean, the WBA have a very, very interesting way of going about things. Yeah, they're, what was it? So I have to make sure I get it right because, hang on a second. I'm going to have a look for, that's it, yes. So the WBA are actually under investigation at the minute due to the link with Sports Consulting Services, which was alleged, you've got to get that word in, shout out the lawyers, bruv, alleged to be taking financial payment in regards for ranking. So, you know, boxing has a funny old way of having these things happen. So, yeah, Manuel Charr, yeah, I mean, I think he tried to sue them because, I don't know, I've genuinely, I've not looked into it too much. I've seen all the headlines that everybody else has seen, but yeah, the Sports Consultancy Services, have a look at that. If you've not looked into SCS and their role, Greg Cohen at the minute and the WBA, there's a lot of good information out there for you, and to see potentially how things are going down. Kieran P asks, thoughts on the Lyndon Arthur fight tonight? I haven't seen an awful lot of Brian Suarez, I have to say. My knowledge of the Argentinian light heavyweight division isn't what it once was, you know. But I've seen enough of him to think that he's going to struggle to cut down the distance against Lyndon Arthur. Lyndon Arthur's a very frustrating fight to watch because you always get the sense that he could be doing more. He's got a lovely jab. The right hand, when he brings the right hand into play, is a very, very good shot. We saw that against Boris Crichton, who we've seen since become, you know, a very tough, rugged, durable guy. Lyndon Arthur was hurting him with that right hand when he threw it, but it took him 6 rounds to throw it. So, yeah, I think Lyndon Arthur wins the fight. Whether or not he gets the stoppage, I think it depends on what version of Lyndon Arthur turns up. If we get the Lyndon Arthur who's kind of, he's a very laid-back character, Lyndon Arthur. If we get the kind of languid Lyndon Arthur who's going to come and pop the jab, you know, throw the right hand if I'm ready, like, then we could see it go the distance. But I want to see Lyndon Arthur come out, step in behind the jab and get that right hand off. He's got a beautiful jab and a beautiful right hand. So hopefully we get to see Lyndon Arthur go through the gears tonight. And look, light heavyweight is like, he's got a win over Anthony Yard, a big win, a stoppage win for him on terrestrial TV where he lights up the country with his performance. Who knows? You could see him in the frame for the winner or loser of Joshua Boxeo versus Dan Aziz. So yeah, looking forward to that one. Eat, sleep, box and repeat. Shocking there's no VADA testing for Smith Eubank. Seems like we are always talking about drugs. Rightfully so as well, because it is a very, very serious issue in boxing. And at the minute, boxing is under the microscope because of performance-enhancing drugs. We saw yesterday promoter Ben Shalom of Boxer say that it was confidential, shortly followed by Joe McNally, of course, Liam Smith's trainer, breaching confidentiality and saying that there had been no VADA testing for the camp. I think VADA at the minute in this country, with the Conor Benn saga, as it has kind of carried on to rumble on and on and on, is in a difficult position because, okay, if VADA testing is in place for a fight in the UK, we've seen recently that apparently you can't punish anybody for it. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. I know and I'm aware that the UCAD have tested. UCAD do test internationally as well. Whether or not that has happened, whether Eubank, who of course has been in America for the vast majority of the last 4 months, has been tested by UCAD or an appropriate body while out there, who knows. We saw Chris Eubank Jr. posting pictures of his urine, not for me really, but to show that he had been drug tested in the build up to the fight. But yeah, for me, this is only my humble opinion. I do believe that VADA should be in place for big fights, and I think it should be a minimum of a 12-week window, ideally 14 or 16 weeks testing. Of course, with VADA, the Voluntary Anti-Doping Agency, you are also, the test that you subscribe to, that you enroll with, it's more extensive. There are certain things that are permitted out of competition, which under UCAD testing is any time up until the day of the fight, that aren't permitted on VADA. And that is, there's lots of weight cutting that you can do, and there's lots of there's lots of things that are on the VADA list that aren't on other lists, and that basically allows you to kind of a big example of that was Billy Joe Saunders with Demetrius Andrade. He failed for oxylofrin, which on UCAD is permitted outside of competition, which is of course before the build up to the fight, but under VADA testing it is banned because oxylofrin and the nasal spray, which is what it was kind of the over-the-counter, the explanation, oxylofrin does help you burn weight. It does help you get fit, lose pounds, keep your strength, all of that good stuff. So yeah, I am of the opinion that VADA testing, 14 weeks, 16 weeks for big pay-per-view events, because that way you have enough of a testing window. One of the things that I found pretty unbelievable about the Dillian Whyte incident for the Joshua rematch, that of course didn't happen, was the fact that it was like a 4 or 5 week testing window and he still tested positive, that's difficult to do. The more extensive the testing, the more likelihood of people being caught, but 4 or 5 weeks isn't the most extensive testing in the world. Have you listened to Conte on the opening bell this week? Fascinating and alarming in equal measure. I haven't listened to it yet, but Victor Conte is somebody who I'm very interested in and very interested by, for good and bad. Victor Conte, I mean, there's people whose opinion I respect and seek for counsel, people like Thomas Hauser, people like Margaret Goodman, who of course swear by Victor Conte now, a reformed man and doing a lot to help anti-doping in boxing. But let's put it out there, Victor Conte served time for doping athletes. He works with Remy Korchemny, who is the still snack. We've seen all the snack athletes and the snack, I'm probably getting my words out today, the snack supplements that you can get. Thanks. He has Remy Korchemny as his track and field coach. Remy Korchemny, one quick Google will tell you that he was banned from United States track and field for doping athletes. So I haven't listened to it. I'm intrigued by Victor Conte and who and what he has been accused of in the past. Is he the shining light in boxing? Who knows? But it's interesting to hear from people who do have a lot of experience, both good and bad, in order for us to make our own judgments. But I haven't listened to it just yet, but I will. Of course, it is on Boxing News, the opening bell. Make sure you listen to that wherever you get your podcasts. Justice for Fred Oquendo. Oh, that's what we get. Frez Oquendo, rather. That's what we're going to get next, isn't it? It's going to be manual trial Frez Oquendo. You can just see it now. Winner fights Tyson Fury or Francis Ngannou. We'll see. Jack T. Davis. Just want to shout out the quality of Boxing News Mag. Bunce's column is always super enjoyable and love Matt's opening letter. That is Boxing News. Big up Boxing News. You can get your Boxing News. BoxingNewsOnline.net. You can get your subscription. You want it online, you want it print, you want it both. I have both. Everyone get both. You can get that now. But thanks very much. Boxing News, an institution that I am very, very fortunate and very proud to be associated with. So if you don't have your Boxing News this week, what are you playing at? I would say, well, don't cancel the stream yet, but open a different tab and then get your Boxing News. There we go. We've got you on one-on-one boxing. Okay. Colin 1982 says promoters refusing to work together is what annoys me in marriage. Imagine if Warren and Eddie could kiss and make up. Fights could be made all we want to see. Yeah, I mean, do you remember during the pandemic when Queensbury released that Who Wants It graphic when he had like Matchroom versus Queensbury? That would have been amazing. It would have been like the old WWF and WCW days for the wrestling fans in the chat. But it didn't happen. I interviewed Eddie probably a couple of years ago now, Chisora Parker fight week, or Chisora Parker 2. And I said to him, would you have felt like you were doing Frank Warren a favour? And he said yes. He said that he'd built a business and Matchroom had built a business that were fine during the pandemic. They didn't need to be crossing over any fences and making fights. Look, for the betterment of British boxing, I work in British boxing. We want as many big fights as possible. We want the promotional divides being crossed, but it is a business. You know, if somebody come up to me and said, oh, one of your rivals or one of the other outlets wants to do this with boxing news, I would probably politely tell them to, you know. So it is a business. It's not ideal, but it's just the game, unfortunately. But yeah, I completely agree with you, Colin. We want to see more fights being made. We want to see promoters working together. We've seen very obvious examples of that not happening recently. We've seen fighters taken out of purse bids and withdrawn from fights, and I don't think that's a good look for anybody. But yeah, I think that's what we need to look at and put the pressure on the promoters. Put the pressure on the promoters, and fighters can put pressure on promoters. We saw Ryan Garcia, Davis Garcia, a big driving factor in getting that fight done. I don't care what network, I don't care what we have to do. This is the fight I want. This is what I want. We need more of that in boxing, I think. Little fat medium men like me can only do so much, you see. Happy Power says, hey Rob. Hey Happy Power. I thought Chris looked better than the last weigh-in. Yeah, but I kind of said this earlier. I think hindsight's a wonderful thing. It's easy to look back at the Chris. I'm not saying that this applies to you. I'm sure, Happy Power, you're an honest man. But a lot of people can look back on that now after him being knocked out and go, oh, but, you know, he looked like this. And you know, yeah, I do think that Eubank looked okay. I don't think he looked spectacular. I've seen him look better on the scales. Didn't look particularly drawn in the face, which I did think that he did earlier on this week on the Wednesday. But yeah, we'll wait and see. Like, some fighters, I mean, when you get to the stage of the career that they're both at as well, both Liam Smith and Chris Eubank Jr. are 35 and 34 years old respectively, you start to look a bit different. You start to change. Your body composition changes. Sometimes you're a bit tighter in the face. Liam Smith has got those beautiful white teeth. I mean, they really are spectacular. But having those in makes the rest of your face look a lot more gaunt and a lot, yeah. So who knows, man? Who knows? But we'll wait and see tomorrow night. David Graham, big love from South Africa, Rob. Know you like Frank Martin, but what do you think Shakur does afterwards, assuming he beats Martin? Big love, shout out South Africa every time. Big fan of South African boxing. Big fan of Don McRae. Don McRae, what a man. Anyway, know you like Frank Martin. What do you think Shakur does afterwards, assuming he beats Martin? Is that fight going to happen, though? Is it really? Top rank in PBC? I don't know, man. I think Shakur Stevenson does beat Frank Martin. I want to see Shakur Stevenson fight Vasily Lomachenko while Lomachenko's still around. I love Lomachenko and have been a big fan of watching him over the years. I don't think that necessarily is a fight that ends particularly well for him, but it's a fight that I think while we can make it, I would like to see. Whether or not the Frank Martin fight happens, maybe we get Shakur versus Lomachenko after. I know there's talks about Lomachenko boxing George Kambosos, which of course was a fight that could have been for the undisputed title had it have happened last year. And also, it allows Shakur Stevenson to have a bit of a measuring stick. If he boxes Vasily Lomachenko and he styles on him and maybe stops him, and you know, that's an easy measuring stick and a yardstick for Devin Haney, which is seemingly the fight that people are trying to maneuver. Shakur Stevenson versus Devin Haney, whether it's at 135 or 140, who knows. But yeah, I do like Frank Martin. I don't think he beats Shakur Stevenson. And if Shakur Stevenson beats Frank Martin, if that fight happens, I'd like to see him box ideally Devin Haney, but Vasily Lomachenko, I'll take that one. Okay, Tim Bartholomew. So glad Sonny finally getting the huge fight in December, but does he win it? If so, how? That's a brilliant fight. Sonny Edwards versus Jesse Rodriguez. Unification for the IBF and WBA? WBA? No, WBA? WBO. He's got WBO. He moved down. The WBA Artem Dalakian's got. Yeah, it's a tough ask for Sonny Edwards. It is. he has the ability and the talent to beat anybody in the world. It's a very unique boxing style, Sonny Edwards, that classical back foot style. We've seen Bam Rodriguez in his last couple of fights not quite look like the Bam Rodriguez that lit up Carlos Cuadras and Sarisaket Saul Rungvisai, and that's because he had to go and press the fight on that front foot and trying to hunt guys down and look good. I think that's probably a part of it more than anything. Bam Rodriguez feeling like, I'm a star now, I'm a big superstar, I've got to, blow this guy out, and everyone expects it from him as well. Stopped Sarisaket Saul Rungvisai, and everyone expects him to just blow through everybody after that. And fighters will tell you they have peaks and valleys when they're boxing. You get yourself up for the really big fights, you maybe not as up for the slightly smaller fights, which is something that we heard from Sonny Edwards ahead of his last fight. It's not the one to get his juices going. It's interesting to see how that fight could plan out, I have to be honest. I don't think that Bam Rodriguez and Robert Garcia are foolhardy enough to just go in there and try and bulldoze Sonny Edwards. Just can't really see that happening. It wouldn't surprise me at all if we saw Bam Rodriguez stand off Sonny Edwards and try and box him. He's bigger, he's longer, and I feel like they'll understand that pressing forward and seeing some of the deficiencies that we've seen in Bam Rodriguez in his last couple of fights, going forward and kind of allowing yourself to be the bull to Sonny Edwards' matador may not be the best way of going about things. So yeah, does he win it? He absolutely can. It's as close to a 50-50 fight as is possible. Does he win the fight? He can. But will he? I don't know. I think Bam Rodriguez has to be a favourite. He has to be a favourite. But great fight, one that we can't wait to see. Daniel Cartwright, he's back again. Dan, the man with the big questions, the man with a plan. You're never going to eradicate PEDs. The only way to catch more people is to randomly tested athletes 365 days a year. Cycles have been completed before getting into camp. Yep, absolutely right. As long as there's rules in sport, people will try and cheat. That's just facts. That's just what will always happen. I know the WBC have the clean boxing program, which if you're in the top 15, in order to be ranked in the top 15 and be eligible for a world title shot, you have to enroll in the clean boxing program with VADA, which is administered by VADA. But while I do appreciate and respect the WBC, and it is something they are trying to do something to combat anti-doping in boxing, or to combat doping in boxing, it's very expensive to put an extensive 365-day-a-year testing program in for however many fighters. The clean boxing program is underfunded. It needs more funding, and if you're going to be Eddie Hearn spoke to Matchroom Boxing a couple of days ago on one of their interviews on their channel about having a pool for Matchroom fighters. That would be fantastic. It would be very, very expensive. Eddie's got plenty of money though. Come on, Eddie, you can pull it out. And it might need a promoter or a network. A network has been something that we've discussed in the past, myself, Thomas Hauser, and kind of put it out there about networks putting their foot down really. And in order to box on our shows, you must be enrolled in this drug testing, and if you fail a drugs test, you're out. That's it. But it's an idealist sort of way of looking at things, isn't it? And that's just not boxing. And ultimately, the pound note rules the roost, and you're asking hundreds of thousands of pounds worth, or hundreds of thousands worth of dollars to be ploughed into something that could mess up your business. Drug testing, yeah, it's needed, but it is a massive problem for promoters, for events. You lose millions of pounds, millions of dollars sometimes if a fighter fails a drugs test. It's not to say that promoters don't want to catch them, but you're throwing good money after bad, if that makes sense in some aspects of it. But absolutely, we need as much drug testing as possible, but we just need the funding for it. Ski Man says, what's the black pudding like in Poland? I didn't have any black pudding in Poland. I barely ate while I was there, to be honest. I was only there for 2 days. I got there Thursday morning, and then I left on basically Friday night. I wasn't there for the fight. But didn't have any Polish black pudding. Is it a delicacy? Is it something that you'd recommend? Yeah, I'll give it a try next time I'm out there. I'll give it a try for Usyk Dubois too, yeah? No problem. Who do you favour from Wood versus Warrington? We've discussed this. I lean ever so slightly towards Lee Wood because I think he's the more form fighter. And yeah, I ever so slightly lean towards him. But I think Josh Warrington is being massively overlooked in that fight. I think he's being written off on the back of, losing to Mauricio Lara, who also beat Lee Wood in their first fight, and then he had a pretty close decision loss to Luis Alberto Lopez at the end of last year, who then went on to really poleaxe Michael Condon and looks to be a very, very good fighter in his own right. So I lean ever so slightly towards Lee Wood, but I wouldn't be surprised if Josh Warrington takes it. Not at all, in fact. Remember, guys, to please subscribe to One-on-One Boxing. I'm getting it from all angles. And I've got people here just telling me, hit the subscribe button. You've got to subscribe, man. You get me told off. You don't want that. Anyway. Okay. Jack T. Davies. When working a show as media, some of the unwritten rules. Okay, this is one that I can start moaning about. So, no photos with fighters. You're not there to get photos with fighters. What are you doing, mate? You don't get a photo with fighters. No cheering in the media section. What are you doing, man? You get some pom-poms, be a cheerleader. You can go on the side, or you can watch at home and cheer or whatever you want. But how are you going to sit there as media and cheer for a fighter, and then if he loses, go and interview the other guy? It doesn't make any sense. Impartiality is key. No photos, no cheering, and no bad odor as well. There's lots of people who sit there sometimes. The media guys stink. Look at me. Like, you want to be sat next to me for 5 hours. Gotta bring that. Yeah. But anyway, the first two are the actual serious one. Although the third one, I am quite serious as well. You know who you are. But anyway, moving on. Happy Power. Hamza Shiraz versus Bentley. When do you think this should be made? Soon. As soon as possible. Why could it not be made next? I don't know. Hamza Shiraz looked fantastic against Mitrofanov at the weekend, or Mitrofanov, whatever. I thought he looked really good. I thought he looked as compact as a 6'5" middleweight can look. And I think that was the first time we've really seen some of the developments of him as a professional under Ricky Funes. Obviously went over to America and boxed over there. And I thought looked pretty good this past weekend against Mitrofanov. Denzel Bentley, he's boxed for a world title. He gave a really good account of himself for that world title against Janibek Alimhanoli. The winner of that fight is ready for a world title shot, in my opinion. I don't think middleweight is anywhere near as deep as it was a few years back. So I don't think there's that many acid tests or litmus tests that you should be having really before you box for a world title. So Hamza Shiraz versus Denzel Bentley, and the winner fights for a world title. How about that? Let's just do it next. Do it next, Frank. Come on, Frank. Anyway, there we go. Lewis Moore says, Rob, with the new channel, have you ever been interested in doing a call-in show? The Boxing Voice do a great job with that format. A more formal version of the Twitter Spaces, maybe. Yeah, well, we have. Yeah, we have this beautiful studio, which if you want to rent it out, you can find it. ID Podcast Studios. You can come here. Never on a Monday between 11 and 1. Never, because that's when I film. But anyway, yeah, we can do it. Yeah, we can do call-in shows. We've been doing a few things, Lewis, to be honest. As I know you have as well. I know you're a busy man. If you need any photography, check out Lewis Moore. But yeah, to a short version would be yes, we are looking to do that, whether it's an audio only or a video or what. To be honest with you, I want to get the rest of the business to a place where all I have to do is just sit down and be on live with you people all the time and just talk and talk and talk. You may get sick of the sound of my voice, so we'll get a few other people in to break the monotony, so to speak. But yeah, definitely. And I like what the Boxing Voice do as well. Whether you like the opinions of the content or what they're saying or who they're saying it to, the actual format is great content. And what they do, Ness and Danny, two good guys as well, is really good. And I'm all for stuff like that. And if we can implement our own version of it, then that's absolutely what we will do. Jack T. Davis 14 says, I have a theory with Dave Allen that, at least in the past, he never put 100% into training as he was scared of failure and wanted that clutch reason to cope for if he did lose. Agree or disagree? It's quite deep. It's quite deep, I have to say. Jack T. Davies 14. I'm just going to call you Jack from now because you're asking a lot of questions, which we rate. Hit the subscribe button. But yeah, I think he might be onto something, but it's difficult to say. Only Dave Allen will know how he felt in those fights. I spent quite a bit of time around him in what I guess would now be considered the first stage of his career, or maybe the second stage, kind of when he was boxing on Matchroom cards regularly. And, he wasn't taking it seriously at all. I saw quotes from him recently saying that his daughter, basically having his daughter, changed his entire life. As somebody who's a parent myself, I can completely see that. I think Dave may have just been not the most disciplined of men, just in general. But it seems as though he's in a good place mentally now. So I don't really know. It's difficult to put yourself in certainly in a heavyweight boxer's mental state. But always had plenty of talent. Was always very experienced going into the gyms and boxing and sparring a lot of top level guys. It's going to be interesting to see how he looks after the layoff. It has to be said, but it seems as though he has his head more screwed on now than certainly it was in the past. But wish Dave Allen all the best this weekend against Fraser Clark. I think we've got a special guest arriving at the minute, which is great. How are we gonna get him in? Okay, we're just straight on in the minute. G-Man's just like jumping in front of the camera. So it's all going off here. It's all going off on one-on-one boxing. Daniel Cartwright says, last one from me. I love how you will give an opinion, prediction, and challenge interviewees unlike other outlets. Has this impacted on access to promoters or fighters? No, it hasn't really impacted on access. Do I think they like me? Probably not, but whatever. How are we doing? We're gonna bring him in. So we are now going to be joined by the one and only Declan Taylor of the George Groves Boxing Club podcast. I think you're going to be on that one there, Dec. Are we on that one? And are we going to the wide now? That's Barry C. You can only sit there if you've been a WBO champion. That's Barry Jones and Chris Bennett. So thanks very much. It's not bad, is it? Yeah, we're working the hat game here. So we've got Davis Garcia. Yeah. That's the other Spence.
Well, we do George Groves Boxing Club hats.
He's literally been on there 30 seconds. And
we do, though.
Already plugging the merch, man.
We do.
Already plugging.
It's on the link tree.
How are you, Declan?
I'm good, mate. How are you? I heard you've just been on this live just chatting bollocks for the last hour and a half.
Yeah, so I felt like I'm like a really, really low rent like auctioneer. Just we've got to win in here.
Sold anything?
No. Sold nothing. Do. Sold some subscribers. So there we go, mate. Adding to the team. How are you? New trim?
Yeah, what do you reckon?
Fresh.
It's short, isn't it? It fucking scalped me, the bastard.
It's fresh. I like it.
Big up E Street Barbers, Clapton.
There's just plugs all over the place. Here, like it. But anyway, Declan,
go on.
Talk to me about the fight tomorrow.
Well, do you know what? I don't generally rematches are annoying. I'm not a big rematch fan because it's like you've seen it already. Half of the intrigue with boxing is like, what's it going to look like? But I find this one really intriguing because I don't know what the score is really. We don't know really if Eubank was in a bad place last time. We don't know what's up with Liam Smith. He's obviously had an injury. Like, how fit is he? I'm very excited about it. I'm finding it hard to picture what's going to happen. What about you?
Yeah, I feel exactly the same. I'm actually a lot more intrigued by the rematch than I was the first fight. I actually predicted a pretty boring decision win for Chris Eubank the first time around. I thought we were going to see like the Eubank that boxed Marcus Morrison and Liam Williams and kind of...
Who's the other bloke? The Southpaw.
Vanek Adiwan.
Big him up.
Yeah, he was.
I liked him.
He had a great name.
Yeah, I remember you messaged me after about 20 seconds of that, telling me about what was going to happen in that fight.
Yeah, what happened?
I think you said it was going the distance. It didn't.
It didn't. No, because he just.
Yeah, did he? What happened? He had bad shoulder.
He said bad shoulder or bad hand.
Anyway, I want to see him back here on these shores.
Vanek Adiwan.
Someone.
That's Chris Eubank Jr. wins. Make the Adiwan rematch. Why not? Love a rematch.
What do you think is going to happen?
I can't really look... No, I was actually turning it off now. I can't really look at the rematch without seeing Chris Eubank Jr. staggering forward in the first fight. And I think that image is burnt into my consciousness because I don't think anybody... Like, I'm sure there's some clever dick going, I said it was going to... Like, I didn't hear anybody say that Liam Smith would get rid of him early. And the way he scythed through him... The fight was over in the blink of an eye.
We've never seen that happen to you.
No, I've never seen him get buckled.
Even with like George and people like that, big punches.
George, like I think he buzzed Eubank a few times, but he's always in there firing back and like even towards. I mean, obviously George's arm fell off in the last round of the fight. But he was there, not ideal. But he was there firing back and he was there trying to put it back on George. And I just can't see it. I think that I'd never felt that. I'm trying to move that around. It's gonna mess with me. I never felt like Eubank coming down from 168 to 160 was good for him. I know he wasn't a 168 and he was never really he wasn't a middleweight. He was bursting at the seams by any stretch of the imagination. But he's always been super lean. Always kept himself in great condition. You never really see him fat. You never really see him heavy.
Doesn't drink or anything like that either.
No, and coming down from 168 to 160, I just felt like he lost a little bit of his robustness, and I think we saw that against my man Wanik and Marcus Morrison and Liam Smith, and Liam Williams. And I think we mentioned earlier on the live that this kind of notion of Eubank being an attritional combination volume puncher, yes, but only for pockets of rounds. He didn't do that for 3 minutes, did he?
Yeah, he has a lot of time off. He always has. I remember Barry saying about that when he was like 2-3-0, that was his problem. But to be fair, at that level, you can kind of get away with it, and there was a lot of the posturing and that, which he's sort of shaken off a bit. But I've never seen that happen to him in the Liam Smith fight. I spoke to Harlem Eubank about it. He did say before everything was wrong and he just wasn't in the zone, and you wonder what that was about, whether it was about the weight and etc. My thing here in this fight is, what can Bomac really do in a short camp? And it's not even they've had a full camp either, as far as I can gather. No. He's kind of jumped in there late, but he's got a nutritionist now, I hear, which is a good thing, because he said even before the Ben fight, which was even lighter, he was like, I'll just try it myself, and if I can't work it out, I'll get one in for that. Which is mental, because as everyone knows, you have to do it for a whole camp. But loads of little intangibles, and also Liam Smith, what's he up to? What that stoppage in that fashion, what's that going to do for his confidence? / will he be complacent? Will he think, I'm going to obviously do it again then? And maybe he'll come unstuck if he gets hurt early, or Eubank's got to hit him with something early, isn't he? Because otherwise he's just be all over him.
But we had a couple of questions here about kind of Eubank's mental state, and not having that uncrackable chin, that granite chin, and now going into a fight and thinking, oh, actually no, I can't. And no matter how he rationalizes it to himself, whether it was the weight, whether he overlooked him, whether he had problems in camp, whatever, the fact of the matter is you got stopped in that fight, and it was a completely legitimate stoppage. It was a completely justified stoppage by the referee. I do agree with Liam Smith in saying that the fight could and perhaps should have been stopped after the first knockdown. Eubank was in a real bad way. I think he got the benefit of the doubt there. But yeah, how is that going to affect him? I think I'm most intrigued by. You make a good point there about Bomac. We were out in Vegas. You didn't come. Yeah, we were out in Vegas for Spence Crawford. And of course, Bomac was, preparing the pound for pound number one for the fight of his career. He wasn't, training Chris Eubank Jr. As far as I could tell while we were out there. We had people in the top ranked gym, which is where Eubank was training. He was very much training himself. 4-5 weeks. And, Eubank does have this kind of habit of going for what's kind of vogue and what's a bit more, a bit sexier, really. I'm not saying Bomac sexy, or if you're into that sort of thing, shout out Bomac. Yeah. But anyway,
I would.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, just putting that. That's going to be the title. But anyway, and he's gone with him, and it's like, okay, well, Liam Smith made the point. Okay, well, what else has he done? He's done a fantastic job with Terence Crawford. Almost reminds me a little bit of Virgil Hunter and Andre Ward.
I thought the exact same thing this week, and it's like you've got someone who's so naturally gifted as Terence Crawford, and you're with him for a long, long time, that then you get that result. And same with Ward and Hunter. But then, okay, Virgil Hunter had obviously success with other boxers, but nothing like the Andre Ward success, and he had no one else as that good. And probably over the course of his rest of his training career, Bomac won't have anyone like Terence Crawford, like pound for pound number one, etc. And it's like, what can he really add to Eubank's game? It might just be that he needs a voice in the corner that he respects and listens to. And we've always said that about Eubank, and it was his dad at one point, and then it wasn't. And then, what was the name of the guy he got over?
Nate Vasquez.
I
thought that was Eubank's. I know James DeGale was a long way away from the James DeGale that beat, beat Darrell, beat Porky
Bute.
Medina, Bute, like that version of DeGale was I think, long gone by that point. But we had Eubank jabbing his way in and then letting his hands go. It's kind of like we've had these different versions of Eubank. At the start, it was just all about the power shots and letting his hands go. And then we had like the recent Eubank is more jab and staying on the outside. But that little kind of crossover bit of Nate Vasquez was, use your jab, but use it to get on the inside, rather than seemingly with Eubank under Roy Jones, it was jabbing and keeping people away rather than using that jab to work your way in and do what you're good at.
And moving his feet a lot when sometimes it would have paid. Like, we know that he's got a great chin and a good engine, and he can punch well in volume. It's more like get close and let your hands go rather than like land a couple, move around. He was moving a lot against Morrison, I think, and it was just a bit like, it's fine, it's nice, he won the fight, but it's not the Eubank that kind of we want to see as fans more than anything. Yeah,
he had him hurt, didn't he, in the second round? He sort of backed up, and then like he tried to go again a couple of rounds later, and it just wasn't quite there. And that's kind of what I mean about him down at 168 pounds now. I'm just not sure that he can go through the gears. We're out in Poland with Paul Smith, who obviously is managing Ziad Al-Mayev.
Yeah, what was he doing there?
Managing Zizo. I think he's got some sort of Saudi connection. He's also managing Darren Till now. Like Paul Smith, like man of many talents. But yeah, I spoke to him and he said that after the third round, which is the round where Eubank starts to let go of the uppercuts and starts to have his success, He said, I was careful not to speak over Declan and Joe Mack in the corner, but the last 10, 15 seconds said he's knackered. Like, make him do that. A few more of those, 3 more rounds of those, and he'll be absolutely Donald Duck.
Get a gap.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what happened. Liam Smith, because he's so experienced, he's just so good at making you work when you don't want to work. And Eubank, where he's been able to kid fighters in the past, or, the aura of him and the presence and the fact that, with respect to some of the opponents he's boxed, he's not been boxing the most stellar of opposition. They've allowed him to have those breaks, whereas Liam Smith won't.
Yeah, that's Liam Smith as well. It's going to be a long fight for Eubank, and Liam Smith's going to get some opportunities again, isn't he? Like, that was the thing in the first fight, trying to sort of guess what might happen, trying to predict what might happen. It was, well, when Liam Smith does get to him, is he really going to hurt him? And because we know how good his chin is, but he did. So then you think, well, if he gets him again, which he will over the course of a 12-round fight tomorrow, whether, he will, regardless of what Eubank's up to, he's going to do it again. So that's why it's hard to pick against Smith, isn't it, for me?
Yeah,
I just can't see how Eubank can win the fight, but it would be remiss of me to back against Liam Smith now. Yeah,
because a lot before the first fight, there was a lot of intangibles as well.
Yeah.
One of the biggest one was, can Liam Smith hurt Chris Eubank? And we found out in spectacular fashion. Okay, going to go through some of our Twitter questions here. So we're going to throw this one over to you first, Declan.
Yeah. From
Craig Scott 209.
Oh, big up Craig Scott.
Big up Craig Scott. Stop writing his weekly piece and tagging me in it, because he was eventually going to get my legs broken. But anyway, where does this show rank in terms of recent pay-per-view events, considering top and tail of the card? Is this rematch, after such a definitive ending, one of the most surprising pay-per-view headliners of our time?
Yes. It's a very low-key pay-per-view. I don't think you can argue with that. To be fair, they've been getting generally and routinely worse. Worse is a bad word, but there was a time when it had to be mega to even consider going on pay-per-view. And even remember Bellew Cleverly rematch, they were like, well, it's a good fight, but we need to stack it. So then they had Groves.
They stacked one side of the card.
Yeah, stacked one side. Or what about what was the one it was a Kell Brook one, and who was
they were going to do Diego
Kevin
Chavez.
Was on there, maybe.
They were going to do Diego Chavez as a pay-per-view, and then he pulled out. And was it Frankie Gavin?
Yeah, Frankie Gavin. And even that as a main event, but then you look at the rest of the card, and I seem to remember it was decent, or it was one of those where you think, okay, this is no longer Lennox Lewis against Mike Tyson. This is what we get. But I'm always a bit, I don't know.
Are you a pay-per-view main event guy, or are you a pay-per-view card guy?
Main event, 100%. And I think that it was always the thing where if the fight needed pay-per-view for the fight to happen, then fair enough. But we're seeing fights where they could probably happen without. They're taking a punt on it, I'm sure, and going, let's just see. And you speak to any promoter and they'll say, well, this is the true, you'll find out the true value of the fight and the true value of these two fighters by putting it on pay-per-view. The problem is that we know that there's a small number of boxing fans in this country who will definitely buy it. There's a small number of fans who will definitely stream it. And then there's a vast swathe of casual boxing fans and normal sports fans, maybe like football a bit more and whatever else, who ain't going to buy it because they're like, don't give a shit. And then that's where the sport shrinks and eventually dies on the vine, because it's no longer millions of people watching. It's I don't know how many buys is this going to do? Well, 100,000? I don't know.
By all accounts, I have to be careful what I say here. By all accounts, I think the first fight they wanted it. I think 200k was the golden number. The goal.
Yeah, Eubank's big name, and he'll always draw. And
do you think the fact that he got knocked out in the first fight will help or hinder the promotion?
I think. Probably hinder, I guess, but I think what's hindered the promotion is kind of a lack of it. That I don't know, I'm in the sport. We're in the sport every day covering it, and it's barely even sort of realised it was coming. I don't know. It's not a great one, not a great, pay-per-view. Again, like I always say, what I always judge these things by is my mates who are not into boxing. Yeah. And is anyone asking me about this fight? Not a single person. Not a single person has messaged me going, oh, what do you reckon? Even though it's Eubank. So I think he's lost that little bit of buzz and that novelty factor with the kind of casual audience. But it's a good point. It's a very underwhelming one. But it's always harsh to say that, because there's still fighters on there who've put everything and given everything for this, and it's like the biggest night of some of their lives. So it's not their fault that it's on pay-per-view, but what the problem is that there's going to be so few eyeballs really on this, when there should be more.
What do you think? Is that indicative of kind of where we're, one of the things that we discussed earlier was kind of the state of play, I guess, with British boxing at the minute? We've got more promoters and more broadcasters than ever before, which sounds fantastic, but that leads to more politics and more fights potentially not happening. Do you think that lack of buzz, so to speak, your words, not mine, Ben, do you speak to him? Do you think that's indicative of where we are as an industry at the minute and just the boxing land, lie of the land?
Yeah, a little bit. And speaking from like a journalist perspective, there was a time when all the guys, the top 10, the names in the sport would all get in a newspaper. So I'd be like, go into a presser, phone in the paper, got this guy saying this. Yeah, cool. Give us 12 bars, give us half a page, whatever. Now, barely anyone gets in the newspaper because, and again, is that just because it's cyclical and they're not as good and not as interesting? Or is it because the sport is now behind further doors and barriers? And I think, I don't know, I'd love to know Shalom's sort of opinion on it, because you would hope that there would be an awareness of how big the fight is and how big the buzz is, and they'd be honest about that. Because surely, I don't know, what do you think? Do you think the buzz is equal to other pay-per-view fights?
We've not had that many this year, though.
No, that's true.
Like,
true.
and I think rightly so. And the ones we have had, I don't think should have been. Like we've had. Okay, so Joshua Franklin wasn't pay-per-view, but for all intents and purposes, it was because and it became the new price point came out at the time, so it's not pay-per-view, but with W subscription. Okay, but anyway, I think it is kind of a byproduct essentially of where we've been as a sport for the last year or 18 months or whatever. I think. When Eddie Hearn and Matchroom went to DAZN, you took what was the best stable in boxing at the time and put it behind a paywall on an app that, my dad, you mentioned Cleverly Bellew too. He bought that. He bought all of them. He'll buy any of them. If he sees them advertised, I like the boxing. Yeah, no worries. Sometimes you don't even know who it is. He's the people who you need to be locking into buy pay-per-views. He'll buy it tomorrow, yeah. He'll buy it tomorrow.
Not streaming it?
Mate, don't, I'm not getting into that. Like, I've had enough arguments with him about what I stream. Not that I stream at all, ever, because obviously
apart from this,
we're a live stream. Big up, hit the subscribe button. Anyway, but he will buy it. But again, it's kind of like people like Anthony Joshua not being as visible anymore. I know AJ can get onto Sky Sports, and if he says something, it makes news, but it's not the same as when you have a big Joshua build-up and a big fight week. And the times that we have seen him on Sky in the last 18 months, 2 years, he's been beaten both of those times. So that doesn't always lend itself to a healthy pay-per-view market, I don't think. And it is the lack of star names coming through. Those names you didn't mention, but I can take a pretty good guess as to who they are. Amir Khan, Carl Froch, Kell Brook, Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, Bellew, Hay. Yeah. Like, you can keep going on and on and on.
But then that's what I mean. I don't know whether it's kind of catch-22 in it. Is that because newspapers, boxing as a sport has fallen off? Or I was thinking this, right? Say someone like Joshua Buatsi, right? Very good fighter, on the brink of world titles. Should be one of our biggest names, biggest stars when you look at like the package. What's different to him and say, DeGale's different because he won the gold medal, but even Groves will get in the paper. Buatsi doesn't really. Might get a tiny bit, but for the most part, no. Is that because of a personality thing? Is that because of a promotional thing? Or is that just because newspapers have moved on and now and because also over the last 10 years, we've moved towards like faster news, clickbait, all that sort of stuff. And boxing, people saying this fight might happen or I want to knock him out or whatever is no longer interesting.
I think it's a combination of a few of them, to be fair. I mean, I think like boxers are becoming a lot more, I say PR savvy, but I don't think it is savvy. I think it's doing them a disservice because I think boxing is such a unique sport to have two fighters go in there and have a fight that I think, this whole kind of, I'll leave it to my team and, we'll go back to the drawing board and whatever. It just doesn't, that's not the right fit for the sport, I don't think. And, Groves sitting there with a Rubik's Cube or sitting there with a wit here and a line there and a big, a push and a pull and all of that stuff. That all adds, and it's over a period of time. Joshua Buatsi, I kind of made this point earlier on. He's boxing Dan Aziz now. He's already boxed Craig Richards in a very similar fight, like very similar level fight. The domestic one before the big one. And now he's a year later or whenever that fight was, and it's the domestic before the big one. And eventually, look, you kind of hit the nail on the head, really. People want their information faster. People lose interests. And I think in this country, for the casual fans, the lack of Joshua Fury, but it being absolutely rammed down everybody's throats every 6 months has really, really made a dent in people's interest in the sport. People don't believe that a fight is going to happen, even when you see a poster from the promoter.
So and even Joshua, before that, Joshua Wilder. And I know because I basically earned a living off of writing those stories, and that fight never happened. It was literally back pages and stuff on Hearn saying, I've got a meeting with Shelley Finkel tomorrow. This is going to happen. The fight never happened. So that kind of people were let down by that. So I don't know, maybe that's taken a toll a bit, but in the end, it's down to the quality of the fight. And I think Craig makes a good point that there was a conclusive knockout in the first fight. So it's not like people are clamouring to see it again. But having said that, I am excited about it, intrigued by it.
Okay, well, let's stop talking about fights that aren't happening, and let's talk about fights that, still aren't happening, but we want to see. Chris Billam-Smith, shout out Chris Billam-Smith, WBO Cruiserweight Champion of the World, asks, what fight are you most excited about that you think will happen in the next 6 months? Well, it's not the Cody rematch. Anyway, move on.
Ooh,
shout out Chris Billam-Smith.
Which fight most excited about? I'm excited about Canelo Charlo. That's actually happening. Because I give Charlo a good chance in that fight. Very, very excited about it. What's that?
You'll be there.
I'll be there. You'll be there?
I'll be there. Big time.
We'll be there. Yeah. Cool, blimey. React Paul Goulamarian to stay in his division. If that happens. Excited about that. Are you?
Yeah, good fight.
I think it's an action fight.
Really hard fight.
Proper hard, dirty fight.
Yeah.
Action all over the shop.
Yeah.
What do you think happens in that?
I don't know. I think Richard Riakporhe's probably done some good sparring with a horse, so probably prepares him for it.
Is he going to go down in the first? No, that's not a racing analogy.
I don't know. We don't do racing. We need the boys. Shout out Kipling every how. Yeah, but we need to get them up here. I think it's a hard fight for Richard Riakporhe. I think Goulamarian's good. He bucks Egorov, but he hadn't fought in like 3 years. I think
didn't crack though, did he, against Egorov?
No, but Egorov was there. I think.
Didn't scramble him at any point either, did he?
Didn't scramble the Egorov, no. Oh, here we go, Decto. You've got to keep up with the puns. Anyway, I think the time to box Goulamarian was then, because he'd been out of the ring, and now he's got that under his belt. I think it'd be a hard fight for Richard Riakporhe, I have to say. But for me, fight I'm most excited about that I think will happen in the next 6 months.
I'm racking my brains. What's happening at lightweight? What's going to pop out?
Nothing really. Lomachenko Kambosos might happen. Shakur Stevenson versus Frank Martin. It's kind of like, and will that happen? Yeah.
At heavyweight, 6 months. We might be talking Usyk Fury.
Yeah, we might be.
Yeah.
We also might not be.
Yeah.
We might be.
Don't want to go into that, but that's the.
We might be talking Usyk Hrgovic, and then Fury versus Ngannou 2. I don't know. There's not really been anything announced. I was looking forward to Callum Smith and Artur Beterbiev.
Yeah, that's fucking ages now.
Yeah, that's good. Would that be in the next 6 months? Yeah, probably just about. Yeah. So I think to round off that question, Chris, is we don't really know. So who knows? Spence Crawford too. Does that do anything for you? It looks as though we might get that.
Doesn't do anything for me. Makes a lot of sense, I think, for Crawford. To be honest,
Crawford's like 154. Yeah, no.
Take what you want. It's one of them where it makes an awful lot of sense for him. I'm sure it makes a lot of sense for Spence as well, because he can't go out like that, or he can't not have a second crack at it. So I'll watch it. I'm sure we'll be there, won't we?
Yeah.
And then if that leads into Crawford against, who knows, Canelo or Charlo, Charlo is to fight Jamel Charlo and Crawford at some point.
Yeah, that would be amazing, wouldn't it? Okay, right. Let's try and get a couple of quick ones in just before we wrap things up, and I'm getting the wave from Jordan Pollock.
Jordan's giving it
yourself, man. Anyway,
if they made a statue of him, he'd be doing that wave, or running a marathon.
If Fraser Clark or eating really expensive food. If Fraser Clark looks good, who are you sticking him in with next, Deck?
Ooh, Adley. Never going to happen, but
I think he's fighting Wardley, isn't he? Adley.
Yeah, he could fight the winner. Yeah. I think it's time we get all of them popping.
And I think that's kind of a good example of what we were talking about earlier, of like too many cooks and too many networks, and like the investment that's Boxer and Sky had made into Fraser Clark. Not defending it, but you can understand why they're not willing to throw him onto another network to potentially get beat. Of course not,
especially at his age and his sort of standing in terms of profile wise. He's one of their sort of leading lights, really, isn't he, Fraser Clark, in terms of how many fights he's had for, bang for his buck. So any of them guys, that's what I'd want. I expect him to look good as well. To be honest, I think it's a good style for him. Dave Allen, obviously, in his pomp, that's a much better fight. I love Dave Allen, and I hope it's a great night for him. I hope he has a great performance. But Fraser Clark is a very dangerous heavyweight, and he big lump, can punch, active and ready to go, and also like chomping at the bit, frustrated by all the palaver with the purse bid and whatnot. So,
and I think will be much better for that 10 rounds against Marius Vac. People can say what they want about Marius Vac, but it's a rite of passage.
100%.
And to go 10 rounds with Marius Vac and win every round when you've had 7 fights or 6-7 fights, that's good by any metric. Okay, the final one before we wrap things up here on One-on-One Boxing. Please like, comment and subscribe before we do so. Lewis Watson says, with Eubank claiming a towel won't be in his corner this weekend, how does that underline his immaturity as a fighter and explain why he's never become a world champion, i.e. not giving power to a coach?
That's a good point. It's one way of looking at it, that he's going. But didn't Wilder do that with Malik Scott in the third Fury fight? Say no towel. I don't like that bollocks about no towels. I hate that, actually. And yeah, it's a good point. The coach should really be the one. If Bomac's like, we don't need a towel, then that's his decision. He has to live with it. Well, actually, he doesn't, because Eubank's the one doing the fighting. Yeah. But if your coach is like, I want a towel because anything could happen. This is a fight, and etc. etc. You've got a life to live beyond this night. I'd rather the coach got the choice, but I'm sure Bomac's not gone, I want a towel, Chris, and Chris has gone, you're not allowed one, and he's gone, okay. I'm sure it's a press conference, isn't it? And it's more of a metaphor, isn't it? He's saying we're not gonna quit in this fight for any reason. We'll be out on the shield sort of job. I don't know if it's a bit of a stretch to say that it's immaturity and that has led to him not getting a world title fight, but there is something about Eubank's personality that has got in the way of his development as a potential champion. Yeah, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of factors at play for Eubank. I don't think it can be. I think that's a good point, and it's not a point that I'd necessarily considered, but I think that there are a multitude of factors at play. One of them being your mate George Groves. But anyway, that's all we have time for today on One-on-One Boxing. I'm going to stop because Jordan's jumping around out of his skin over there. We've got to wrap things up, man, before he comes and mashes us up live here on One-on-One Boxing. But from me, Rob Tebbutt, from George Groves Boxing Club's Deck Taylor, thanks very much for stopping by. Let us know in the comments who you think's going to win tomorrow night. Liam Smith versus Chris Eubank Jr. 2. Will it be repeat or revenge? Let us know, and we'll catch up with you next time. There we go.